Hey everyone, I'm back again, and today I'm taking a look at the Master of the Universe Origins He-Man 2.0. And this is going to be the He-Man moving forward, which is kind of the default He-Man, and the original version's being retired. So I'm going to show you some of the improvements and changes that have been made, and do a bit of a comparison. The most obvious change is the head. You can see that first release of Origins He-Man had a very unique head, which seemed somewhat based more on the original Minicomic look, and a lot of people, including myself to be honest, didn't really like this head. When I first saw it I thought it looked kind of ugly, and I still don't think it's great, but it has grown on me because I kind of like the Origins He-Man having its own unique look, just like the New Adventures He-Man and the 2000X He-Man had their own unique and distinct look for those lines. So as soon as you see those He-Man figures, you know exactly which line they're from, rather than it just being the same thing repeated over and over. So the original head has grown on me. I kind of like it being unique, but as soon as you see this He-Man head, that's He-Man. I mean, I just can't help but love that head. I think it looks far more handsome and heroic than the original Origins head. And that's He-Man. That is He-Man. It was the same with Master of the Universe Classics. I never really liked the first He-Man head from Master of the Universe Classics, and it was only a few years after that was released they then gave us a more vintage-inspired head, and it just screamed He-Man. And a big part of that is nostalgia. I guess newer fans who may be buying these kids aren't going to care, but I don't know, I think that original head is probably more aesthetically pleasing, even without the nostalgia. It just looks more kind of handsome to me, a bit more definition in the face. The first release head almost looks slightly evil to me, with the look on his face. He's just not as heroic as the more vintage inspired head. Moving down the body, they're almost exactly the same really. The paint job on the armour of the new one, for me at least, is really messy. The Iron Cross is completely off and it's kind of spilled over the sides, which is a shame. So I'll probably swap the arm around on these, because this is going to be my default He-Man head from now on. But otherwise, all pretty much the same. It may only barely show up on camera, but the armour is ever so slightly darker grey on the original release than the new one, and I do prefer that darker grey than the slightly lighter on the new one. But because the paint job's dodgy on my new one's armour anyway, I'm going to swap that around and give the old armour to this new He-Man. Down to the legs, and it's a very slight difference. It's almost not noticeable, especially on camera, but the legs on the new He-Man do straighten up a bit more than the legs on the old one. They seem to have done some kind of modification to the knee joints, so you can straighten the legs a bit more. And I noticed this on Faker as well, and some of the other figures from the newer waves, is that they have modified the knee joints so you can get the legs a bit straighter. On that first wave or two of figures, the knees were always quite bent, giving a bit of a squat pose, which is like the original figures, but at the same time, if you're giving the new figures articulation, then you might as well make them so they actually can straighten their legs. And they do seem to have done that with this newer wave. Another difference, which isn't noticeable on the outside, is that the pegs on the joints, when you pull the limbs apart, are thicker on the newer figure. Now these toys are designed so you can pull the arms and legs off and swap them around if you like, but on the newer one, the peg on the end there is a bit thicker, so you can fit the old arm in the new peg socket, but it doesn't fit very tight at all. It barely clips in and will easily pop out. Whereas you can't fit the new arms into the old arm socket at all, because it's just too thick. That peg's too thick to fit in there. So if you want to do any swapping like that with older and newer figures, that won't work. Personally, it's not something I really like anyway. I've got no need to put, I don't know, Beastman's arm on He-Man's body, but for people that do like doing that for whatever reason, that's going to be difficult now. And I'm not sure why this is. I don't know if it's just where they've reused the mould a few times, it's kind of warped a bit, or if they've deliberately thickened those joints. Maybe some kids broke them and there were complaints. I haven't seen anyone online complain about it, but for whatever reason, the pegs on the newer figures' joints are thicker than on the older waves. The axe and shield are exactly the same, so there's no changes there. And now for the second biggest change besides the head is the power sword. On that first release they gave us the half power sword gimmick, which is from the original toy line, but it's not something I've ever liked personally. It was never used in the cartoons or anything, and it just makes the sword kind of ugly, because half the sword is missing, and even if you connect Skeletor's half of the power sword, you've then got a sword that's half purple and half silver and just looks weird. It also never fitted in He-Man's hand very well. When it's a half sword, the handle's too thin. When it's a full sword, the handle's too thick. Whereas on the new He-Man, we get a nice full power sword, which fits in the hand really well, looks great, and, you know, that is He-Man's main weapon. That's how he channels his power, so you've got to have a decent power sword. The first release power sword did have a bit more of a metallic look to it though, whereas the new ones are slightly more plasticky, almost more grey rather than silver. So that's one area where the first release power sword is a little bit better, to be honest, and it's kind of a shame the new sword isn't more metallic looking like that first one. I'm not sure why they changed the plastic colour on that newer one, but otherwise the newer sword is vastly superior. These are the European card backs, but they're pretty much identical from the front, but on the back there are quite a few differences. The artwork at the top's the same, though the positioning of the star saying Minicomic included is a bit different. And once again, this is the European packaging, so maybe it's not going to be the same for the American, but the illustration is different on the side. You can see they've updated the head on the He-Man, and also on the newer one it's advertising the newest range of toys, including Skeletor, who's got an updated head, and, you know, the Faker and Fisto and the updated Evelyn and Merman. There's also another change at the bottom here. You've got a new logo saying Mattel empowering the next generation through play, which isn't on the original one. The new He-Man also comes with a different mini-comic featuring different characters that are in this new wave. The only other minor difference I've noticed is that the orange on the belt and gauntlets of the new one is a bit lighter than on the original. I don't know if that would be the same with every figure. It might just be that mine had a bit of a thinner amount of paint put on or something like that. Not a major thing. But otherwise, that's all the differences that I can see, at least, between these two releases. If you've noticed any more that I haven't, then let me know in the comments. But hopefully this has helped some people decide if they want to invest in buying the new version of He-Man or just stick with that original version. They did release a vintage style head the same as this with the Battle Armour He-Man, but he didn't come with the updated power sword. So, other than the paint job being a bit sloppy on the armour of my one, which might not be the same with all of them, I ordered this online so I couldn't check it first, and I have noticed that these figures are better to be checked first. With a few others I've seen wonky eyes on Hordak and Merman, and so it is better if you can to pick them up in stores so you can compare paint jobs and pick the best one. But they're not always the easiest thing to find in stores, sadly, so sometimes I have had to resort to ordering online and just kind of taking my chances. But other than the slightly dodgy paint job, the new head sculpt looks better in my opinion, the new sword looks better, the new version stands slightly taller because his legs will straighten out, so I think it's definitely worth picking up. Thanks for watching my Master Universe He-Man comparison. Hopefully it's been helpful to you, and I'll see you again soon.